We are here to participate together in a day that celebrates Stetson's values, which are broadly described as personal growth, intellectual development, and global citizenship. Now, while these terms can seem abstract initially, in practice, we see them work on multiple levels on our campus and in our community. For instance, the bus tour this morning, which hopefully many of you are on, Race, History, and Community into Land, speaks experientially to the intellectual and personal growth of our own city. The community garden build in Spring Hill, also this morning, further evinces our values in action and reminds us that global awareness begins at home. What these communal activities, the workshops this afternoon, and our annual events illustrate is that our values are not mutually exclusive. They often blend together in surprising and varied ways. We promote personal growth that we may continue to challenge ourselves on the journey to greater self-knowledge. We encourage intellectual development that we may constantly foster a spirit of exploration and integrity no matter the endeavor. And we strive for global citizenship that we may be active, informed, and responsible participants in local communities as well as throughout the world. As lifelong learners, members of the Stetson community embody and project our values internally, in our immediate spheres of influence, and in the world at large. We can even see these same intersecting motivations in the different religious traditions of the world. According to one popular hadith, a biographical account of the Prophet Muhammad, he is quoted as saying, "Seek knowledge even as far as China," illustrating that intellectual development is greatly aided by global engagement. For their part, Buddhists in China critiqued their own focus on meditation, with a certain Master Feng Gan stating, quote, "If you are able to penetrate the truth completely, then there's no use in sitting there like a lump." Personal growth comes with an introspective but active presence in the world. This diverse consilience of values is exactly what today's events are all about. Savannah Jane Griffin, head of the Values Day Planning Committee and truly the brains behind this operation, will join us in a minute to discuss the day's program of events. But before she does, I would like to thank the members of the Values Day Planning Committee, without whom today's activities would not have been possible. If you are on the Planning Committee, would you please stand now to be recognized? These individuals, friends, colleagues, and students, all of them, have worked tirelessly since the spring semester to plan the events, coordinate meetings, consolidate ideas, reserve spaces, and dodge hurricanes. So thank you again. Also remember that when you all walked in, were given a card with 3 wishes on it, right? Yeah. One for self, one for Stetson, and one for the world. Take a moment to fill in your wishes for these 3 items on the card, and when you exit today, hand them to the Green, White, and You member outside. They will then be hung up in the Palm Court and available for viewing throughout the week. This activity is meant to be reflective in nature in order to encourage intellectual development and personal growth. Now may I present Savannah Jane Griffin.
So 7 months ago, our planning committee came together and dreamed of what this day could look like. I can tell you it's truly incredible to see the number of people here this morning, people that are going to be reflecting on their individual values and on the values here at Stetson University. I'm going to go through this program. Some of you might have gotten this on your way in. If you weren't able to get a program, you can follow along online at stetson.edu/valuesday, values-day. You could also Google Stetson Values Day and it'll come up. So just some logistical things. At the conclusion of this keynote address, we will have a community lunch in the Commons. If you don't have a meal plan, it is a free lunch to you today. Enjoy it. Our dining services have provided an amazing meal for us. Following that, at that same time, actually, there is going to be a read that will be facilitated by Rajni Shankar Brown and Lindsay Graves, along with our keynote speaker, Irshad Manji. This is an RSVP event. If you weren't able to RSVP, it is at capacity at this time. And that's going to be taking place in the Rinker Welcome Center in the Lynn Presentation Room. Throughout the afternoon, from noon to 4, there will be a series of excellent exhibits in our Homer and Dolly Hand Art Center. From 2 to 4:30, we will have workshops divided into 2 blocks. The first being from 2 to 3:15, and the second from 3:30 to 4:30. And these will be taking place all over campus, primarily in the Lynn Business Center and Sage Hall, Rinker Environmental Learning Center, DuPont Ball Library 25L. You can check your booklet and the website as well. And when you're on the website, if you're looking at the schedule or you're looking at the workshops, make sure that you click the name of the workshop or the name of the event that you're looking at, and a drop-down will appear with the description and the location. So for students, there are 7 cultural credits as of right now. If you're here right now, you can get 7 cultural credits for the rest of the day. So that's exciting, and you can find those listed in the program and on the website. At the end of this opening, there will be 3 cultural credit stations outside in the Palm Court, so you'll be able to scan your cultural credit. Let's see. And all of the events today, you'll be able to get your cultural credit at the end of the event, except for the workshops in the location of that event. The workshops, you'll have to go to the Carlton Union Building and scan. There will be, our Honors Council is going to be setting up a table, and it's based off of the Honor Code. So if you've attended that workshop, go there and get your cultural credit, and they'll be there from 3:15 to 5 p.m. So make sure that you get there to get your cultural credit right after the workshops. With that, we have a full day ahead of us, and I'm sure you can't wait to see what's to come. But I would like at this time to introduce our president, Dr. Wendy B. Libby.
So I am in my 9th year as president at the university, and for all of those 9 years, as well as a handful of years before, we've had Values Day. But I must tell you, I have never seen a turnout like I see today, and I am really taken aback and thrilled by it. I'm not only thankful to the committee and everyone who's marketed this, but I'm thankful to the Stetson University community that cares enough about the mission and values of this institution to show up today and to jump in with both feet to be part of our activities. So regardless of anything else you accomplish today, you should know you have accomplished taking my breath away by your participation. And more than any other day, this is the day where we really are many voices, one Stetson, where we reaffirm our devotion to community and to expanding our perspectives and challenging some of our assumptions. So at dinner last night, 8 of us had the pleasure to be with our keynote speaker. And I must say, there were any number of assumptions that were challenged about, is there universal truth? What about moral relativism? And can you ever really know where the universe starts or stops, or how it was started? And how does that intersect with faith? And it was quite a fabulous dinner. And I was so thankful for you to engage us in those conversations. So engaging in the collective exploration and reflection of our values is something that's really, really important. And this tradition began under the leadership of my predecessor, Dr. Douglas Lee, for whom this chapel is named. And we need to give our silent thanks every year to him and his vision in doing that. It was so important to him that our values be inclusive, that all of us find a way to be part of it, and that we be integrated as a community. So you have your full Values Day schedule. It offers a multitude of opportunities for you to stretch and to share, and I hope you will participate in as many of those activities as you can. At this point in the program, though, I'd like us to take a few minutes for a very special announcement that I believe fits in perfectly with the tone and intent of Values Day and who we are as an institution. We're so thrilled to have representatives with us from the Peace Corps National Office to share this announcement. As many of you are aware, and certainly those of you of my generation, because we were among the very first Peace Corps generation, the Corps has a storied history of inspiring tens of thousands of Americans to serve as ambassadors for peace, building capacity and strengthening relationships across the world. In a time where the Peace Corps mission of promoting global peace and understanding is of the utmost importance, a group of our faculty, staff, and students prepared an application for Stetson to be the first private liberal arts institution in the state of Florida to host the Peace Corps Prep program. This student leadership program perfectly aligns with Stetson's mission of creating global citizens who are tackling the world's most complex challenges. So to that end, I'm very pleased to introduce to you Erin Gibbs, who is an experienced leader in government administration and international development. Her current role is the Chief of Operations for Volunteer Recruitment and Selection, and she oversees the largest department in the Peace Corps with a staff in 7 different US-based recruiting offices and in the Peace Corps headquarters. Their task is recruiting, assessing, and placing somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 volunteers in more than 60 countries each year. Prior to moving into the position in Washington, she was the Peace Corps Director of Management and Operations in Romania and Cambodia. So her career at the Peace Corps began in 2007. If you'd like to imagine for yourself what you could be doing 10 years out of Stetson, she was a volunteer in Macedonia, working in the community development area. I'm really so excited. We had lunch today with our breakfast this morning with a number of representatives from the Peace Corps. And the more and more we talked, the more and more we knew that this was an absolute perfect marriage for Stetson University with the Peace Corps. So with that, let me introduce Erin Gibbs.
I'm so happy to be joining you here today on this beautiful campus and this beautiful chapel to celebrate the launch of our Peace Corps Prep partnership with Stetson. But first, I'd like to take a moment to recognize Dr. Elizabeth Boggs and Timothy Stiles, along with the rest of their colleagues, Savannah Griffin, Karen Ryan, Janie Graziani, and Clay Henderson, who are the reason we are all here today. Your tireless efforts to bring Peace Corps Prep to Stetson will change the lives of future students in innumerable ways. Thank you for working so diligently to execute this program and including it in today's celebration, as it seamlessly relates to what Values Day is all about. We are looking forward to a long and successful partnership with you. So along with us here today, I would like to also introduce our new Associate Director for Volunteer Recruitment and Selection, Chip Wheeler. Chip just came to us in Peace Corps last week, and we are looking forward to his leadership and continuing to improve the applicant experience and attracting the best and brightest to be the next generation of Peace Corps volunteers. And while we've gathered today to formally launch this exciting new collaboration, I'd also like to acknowledge that today's celebration comes after a trying few weeks in the wake of Hurricane Irma. I know that many in the community are still recovering from the devastation of this storm, and that many of you have been dedicating your time and energy to assisting with relief efforts. I just want to recognize that determination to lend a helping hand, to ask, if not me, then who? Even as many of you are recouping from the storm's devastation in your own homes and families, to me that just speaks volumes to what being a Hatter is all about. Hatters making a difference in local communities and in communities across the globe is the inspiration behind our new Peace Corps Prep program. Earlier this month, one member of the Hatter family, a Stetson graduate, Orion Emmett Mayer, was sworn into service as a Peace Corps volunteer in Morocco. There are currently 16 Stetson University graduates serving as Peace Corps volunteers in Benin, Botswana, Cameroon, El Salvador, Ghana, Indonesia, Madagascar, Morocco, Mozambique, Nicaragua, Paraguay, Peru, Uganda, and Vanuatu. Since the Peace Corps was founded in 1961, 95 Stetson University graduates have served overseas. And though the Peace Corps Prep program just officially launched this semester, we already have a number of students that have enrolled in the Peace Corps Prep program, and a number of them are here with us today. Please stand up and be recognized. So we hope that these students will be adding to the history of Peace Corps and Stetson alumni in service in the future. Since the founding of Peace Corps by President John F. Kennedy, almost 250,000 Peace Corps volunteers representing all 50 states have served in 140 countries around the world. What sets the Peace Corps apart is the way our volunteers make a difference. They live and work alongside the people they serve, collaborating with local communities to address some of the world's most important challenges, from food security to youth empowerment to fostering the next generation of entrepreneurs. For more than half a century, Peace Corps has made a lasting difference at what we call the last mile of development, some of the most underserved, hard-to-reach communities across the globe. The world has certainly changed since 1961. However, Peace Corps' 3 goals remain the same. Number 1, to help the people of interested countries in meeting their need for trained men and women. Number 2, to help promote a better understanding of Americans on the part of people served. And our 3rd goal, to help promote a better understanding of other peoples on the part of Americans. Service in the Peace Corps is a life-defining, hands-on leadership experience. Even while volunteers are serving their host communities, they are also investing in their own future. Volunteers receive rigorous technical training, invaluable professional experiences, and an incredible opportunity to immerse themselves in another culture, live as part of a community, and build lasting relationships. When volunteers return home, they bring back with them a global perspective and deeper cross-cultural understanding. They are better prepared to be thoughtful professionals, service-oriented community members, and socially conscious leaders in our increasingly globalized world. It's no surprise that countless returned Peace Corps volunteers, which include CEOs, members of Congress, doctors, teachers, scientists, and leaders in just about every field you can imagine, say that Peace Corps not only changed their lives, but launched their careers. So why Peace Corps Prep? What can it add to a student's undergraduate experience, and how does it benefit the Peace Corps? The purpose of the Peace Corps Prep program is twofold: to foster stronger partnerships with colleges and universities, and develop a pipeline of highly qualified Peace Corps applicants. Our vision is a Peace Corps that represents the very best of the United States and reflects the rich diversity of our country. As part of that effort, we are expanding our partnership with universities across the country to introduce Peace Corps to a whole new generation. Peace Corps Prep is our newest university program and the first designed for undergraduate students. In the past year, we have more than doubled our number of prep programs, bringing us to over 120 partner schools around the U.S. The Peace Corps Prep program aims to prepare undergraduate students for international development work and potential Peace Corps service by guiding students to take classes that will directly relate to their work in the field. It offers targeted educational and skill-building opportunities to undergraduates who are interested in serving with the Peace Corps or within the international development community, and it includes a service and language learning component based on students' interests. The program is also a win for the Peace Corps because the curriculum truly enhances an applicant's readiness for service. As you may have heard, we have been receiving record-breaking numbers of applications in the past few years, thanks to our new application process. But with a larger pool of candidates, it becomes more challenging for applicants to stand out. So when we see Peace Corps Prep on an applicant's resume, it sets them apart from other candidates. We know they have the relevant coursework in international development. We know they have been volunteering in their communities. And depending on their focus, we know that they have experience learning foreign languages. This is exactly the kind of preparation Peace Corps wants to see in its prospective volunteers. And Peace Corps Prep provides a seamless channel for students to incorporate relevant training directly into their undergraduate studies. Students who successfully complete the program gain knowledge and experience that makes them more competitive Peace Corps candidates. For those who are interested in serving, there's honestly never been a better time to apply to Peace Corps, thanks to historic changes in our recruitment and placement process. We now have a streamlined application that can be completed online in less than an hour. We have also instituted clear timelines to give applicants more certainty when planning for their future. And the process is a lot more transparent than it used to be. Each of our programs have set apply by and departure dates outlined on our website. But perhaps the most exciting of all, now for the first time in Peace Corps history, you can apply to specific countries and positions that meet your personal and professional goals, whether that means you want to focus on a certain region of the world, a particular language, or a sector that interests you the most. So that is truly great news for students completing the Peace Corps Prep program at Stetson. You can explore your interests here, knowing that after you graduate, you can make a difference in the area you're most passionate about. Your Peace Corps service will align with your choices. We want to inspire a new generation of global leaders to pursue the unexpected. The pathway may not always be the easiest or the most glamorous, but will surely open doors and change lives, including your own. That certainly was the case for me. I joined Peace Corps after working for 9 years in the public accounting field before making the decision to change paths and embark on a life of public service. I served for 2 years as a community development volunteer in the Republic of Macedonia, working to improve the organizational capacity of a local municipality. During my time as a volunteer, I was able to use my specific education and background to support my community, as well as develop new skills and experiences working with young women and teaching English and leadership skills to disadvantaged youth. Peace Corps has had a great impact on my life, as it has on countless others, both in the U.S. and in the countries where volunteers serve. Peace Corps Prep is so valuable. By laying the academic groundwork and inspiring students to explore the world, the program creates more effective, more committed volunteers who are better able to help communities around the world on the issues that matter most. In turn, the cross-cultural, language, and community development skills volunteers gain are useful not only during service, but in a professional sphere that is increasingly more globalized and more competitive. In today's interconnected world, international volunteer service is building the careers of highly trained, culturally competent new leaders, the kind of leaders our country needs to succeed in this global economy. So in closing, I would like to thank you again for inviting Peace Corps here to join you at this special celebration. It is an honor to be here at Stetson and to be celebrating Values Day with all of you. I look forward to our continued partnership.
So, I have the pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker, Irshad Manji. The New York Times describes Professor Manji as Osama bin Laden's worst nightmare. She is a faithful Muslim and a champion of moral courage, which means doing the right thing in the face of your fears. Oprah has given Irshad the first annual Chutzpah Award for audacity, nerve, boldness, and conviction. Irshad produced the Emmy-nominated film Faith Without Fear, which shows how she has risked her life to stand for an Islam that respects human rights and personal liberty. She is also the author of 2 books about religious reform called The Trouble with Islam Today and Allah, Liberty, and Love. Her books are banned in some countries and bestsellers in others. As a media entrepreneur, Irshad founded the award-winning Moral Courage Project. Called the most inspiring channel on YouTube, Moral Courage TV features everyday people who are standing up when others want them to sit down. Irshad is now writing her next book called Don't Label Me, a provocative new take on diversity that will inspire all of us to rethink how we view each other and ourselves. Over the past few years, we have opened Values Day with a performance from the School of Music. This year, Tim Peter, the director of choral activities, asked Irshad Manji for her recommendation on a musical performance that aligns closely with her message and with our Values Day theme of values in action. We hope you enjoy our rendition of Bob Dylan's The Times They Are A-Changin by our very own Eshtemoh Morgan, followed by Irshad Manji's keynote address.
Come gather round, people, wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accept it that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth saving, then you'd better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone, for the times they are a-changin'. Come writers and critics who prophesize with your pen, and keep your eyes wide, the chance won't come again. And don't speak too soon, for the wheel's still in spin, and there's no telling who that it's naming. For the loser now will be later to win, for the times they are a-changin'. Come senators, congressmen, please heed the call. Don't stand in the doorway, don't block up the halls, for he that gets hurt will be he who is stalled. There's a battle outside and it's raging. It'll soon shake your windows and rattle your walls, for the times they're a-changin'. Come mothers and fathers throughout the land, and don't criticize what you can't understand. Your sons and your daughters are beyond your command. Your old road is rapidly aging. Please get out of the new one if you can lend your hand, for the times they are a-changin'. The line it is drawn, the curse it is cast. The slowest one now will later be fast. There's a present now, will later be past. The order is rapidly fading, and the first one now will later be last, for the times they are a-changin'. Yes, the times they are a-changin'. For the times they are a-changin'.
Not yet. Not yet. I'm going to embarrass you for just one moment, because I would love to know, what do you plan to do with your music degree?
Hopefully, I can just take everything that I'm learning and become a successful singer-songwriter, and, hopefully I'll be on your TVs within the next 10 years.
Do you happen to have a favorite artist whose footsteps you would love to enlarge?
Well, I kind of like Ed Sheeran right now, John Mayer, but then Bob Dylan's a big inspiration for me as well, because his songwriting is just something that I just would love to emulate. And, Hendrix too, left-handed and all that.
Always Hendrix, always. Thank you, Eshtemoh. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for the honor, Dr. Libby, Savannah, Cecil, and the many others involved in planning today. Thank you for the honor of bringing me to what I can honestly say is one of the most gorgeous campuses I have ever visited. This is truly special for me. Given everything that the campus and the community have gone through several weeks, can we just take a moment to give silent thanks for passing through Irma as safely as you did, and also to reflect upon many, many more who, for example, in Puerto Rico, can't yet say that they've got safety and security in their lives at this moment. Let's just take a moment to give thanks. Great. I I know that the theme of Values Day this year is values in action. Interesting timing, given what's happening, for example, in the NFL as we speak. Now, I don't need to fill you in on the details, but broad strokes here for those who may have been sleeping under a rock all weekend. So, a number of NFL players and now coaches and some owners are locking arms and, as they say, taking a knee in order to take a stand. Most know that what they are standing for is an end to police brutality against African Americans. However, are taking a stand for freedom of expression. You could call that values in action. There will be those who believe that President Trump's call on fans to boycott games in which they see players and coaches and owners taking the knee, you could say his call to boycott amounts to values in action. You could say that. I won't, but you could. But now the real question becomes, to what end? The way it's being spun right now and the way it's all kind of spiraling, you have to wonder, what here is the greater good? I want to address that this morning. And I'm not going to come to a conclusion that is neat and tidy. But I'm going to take you on a journey. And that journey begins with my own efforts to put my values in action for the sake of a greater good. As you may know from reading the book, Allah, Liberty, and Love, my family and I are refugees from a country called Uganda in East Africa. We were actually booted out by a military dictator named General Idi Amin. And at the time, this was 1972, we wound up in the only country that was willing to accept us, Canada. That is where I grew up, attending two kinds of schools. First, secular public school of most North American kids, and then on top of that, every Saturday, hours at a stretch, too many hours, the Islamic religious school, the madrasa, as we call it. And that's where I began asking seemingly simple, but apparently inconvenient questions. Questions like, sir, why can't girls lead congregational prayer? And he would always tell me, it's in the Quran. It's in the Quran. Read the Quran. I read it. A lot of it isn't there. At the age of 14, I asked the following question. Why do you say, sir, that we as Muslims cannot take Jews and Christians as friends? I don't understand. I want to understand, but here's the thing. Some of my favorite teachers are Christians and Jews. They treat me with respect. So I don't get it why I can't, once I graduate, consider them as friends. I truly came from a place of wanting to wrap my head around this. But my Islamic school teacher took this latest question as nothing more than a challenge to his authority. And so, he lost it. He said to me, look, either you believe or you get out. And if you get out, get out for good. Well, in the nanosecond that I had to figure out what I was going to do, something rose up in me. It was a question. And the question was, Irshad, what are you being ordered to believe? Not asked, not invited, ordered to believe. What I was being ordered to believe just did not comport with my reality. And that's when I knew what I had to do. So I got up, I walked over to the hefty metal door. I actually kicked it open and yelled, "Jesus Christ," and walked right out. I am not proud of that moment. It was said in frustration. Only later did I realize, holy crow, Jesus was a Jew. Only later. So I said this out of pure ignorance. When I got home to my mortified mother, who had received the call, I begged her to understand, Ma, just because I've left the madrasa does not mean I have left Allah. Just because I walked out, or was kicked out, depending on your point of view, from that bricks and mortar building does not mean I have abandoned God. She didn't buy it. But she did ask me to do one thing. She said, I know you are not going to ask for forgiveness. I said, right, because I didn't do anything that needs forgiving. She said, I get it. I understand. Now, she said, I ask only that you're thoughtful about your next move. In thinking about it, I decided, since I was no longer welcome at the madrasa, that the hours that I would have spent there every Saturday, I will now spend at that temple of awesomeness in pre-Google days known as the public library. I still love the public library. And I pored over every book I could find about religions, about cultures, about belief systems. And it is in the library that I discovered something transformational. That Islam itself has its own tradition of independent thinking, of debate, discussion, and reinterpretation. And anyone who's read the first chapter of Allah, Liberty, and Love knows that this tradition has a name. It's called ijtihad. Ijtihad. I know that sounds eerily like jihad to many non-Arab ears, and the truth is, it comes from the same root. Jihad simply means to struggle. It's violent extremists who have given it an instant connotation of terror. Jihad means to struggle, and ijtihad means to struggle with the mind in order to comprehend the world's breathtaking complexity. Discovering that my own religion has this tradition blew my mind, because what it meant was that I no longer had to make a false choice between having questions and having faith. You can have both. And in merging these two, being a thoughtful Muslim as well as a faithful one, I finally felt whole. I had what you might call integrity. Well, that fueled me for the next 15 or so years. And then 9/11 happened. You guys, most of you, were barely toddlers at that time. 9/11 happened. And in my anguish, I realized that having this tradition of ijtihad, of independent thinking, only allowed me to make peace with the fact that I have questions. It didn't address those questions. And so I took the next year to write a book because the world was now asking the questions I had as a kid. And for better or worse, I needed to bring the answers to my fellow citizens, global citizens. And that's when I wrote the book previous to Allah, Liberty, and Love. It's called The Trouble with Islam Today, a Muslim's call for reform in her faith. That book launched me on what I figured would be a book tour. That's what authors do. Instead, this became a 10-year global conversation with young people right around the world. I don't mind admitting to you that during that time, I got plenty of hate mail and not a few death threats. And so one could argue, boy, it took courage for you to do what you did, Irshad. But I have to tell you, that wasn't the courage that moved me. There was one particular moment of courage, not mine, not yet, that moved me. Actually, many moments under one kind of umbrella. It was when young people, including non-Muslims, would come up to me after my university talks, and they'd say, Irshad, thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. Obviously, you're passionate about human rights, and I support you. But, you need to know, it's not just the trouble with Islam today. And in the US South, I would hear, I'm a Christian. If you want to talk about intolerance, let me tell you a bit about intolerance in my own community. I would hear in other parts of the country from young Jews who would say, I really understand where you're coming from, Irshad, because if I utter an iota of criticism of the Israeli government, the elders in my community bear down on me. I even heard from young atheists who at the time would say to me, here's what I'm not understanding. We atheists pretty much preach rationality, but we seem to have more and more of a hate-on for people of faith, like you. So how do I square preaching rationality with practicing irrationality, which is what hate is? What do I make of that? You may be surprised to learn that whenever I would hear that it's not just the trouble with Islam, it's the trouble with us human beings, I would get defensive. I would actually feel like, whoa, are you attacking my position? Are you saying that I've written something that is not true? And somehow, I'll tell you why in a second, I would lash back at a lot of these young people and say, really? So there's trouble in your community, huh? Okay, tell me this. In what other religion can you dissent? Can you take issue with some core beliefs and then have to worry for your life. And a lot of these kids, to their credit, would pause and say something along the lines of, yeah, I never really thought about it that way, thank you. And then they'd come back to their point and ask me, what do you think about the fact that there is so much intolerance in my community? And the more I heard this, the more I realized why I was defensive. For the same reason that my madrasa teacher was defensive. My ego was wounded. Ego is the source of much of our fear. And what I feared in those moments when young people would tell me, there's intolerance in my community too, I feared that I was wrong to write a book about intolerance in Islam. I feared looking weak. I feared having my scholarly authority challenged. I feared. But because so many of the people who were telling me this, because they did not come from a place of defensiveness, when I in what other religion can you challenge and have to worry for your life because you challenged, they would always receive my message with patience and with tolerance. And because their emotional defenses were low, eventually I felt the permission to lower my defenses too. That was the courage I'm talking about. It takes guts to say to your ego, I'm not going to let you win this time. I'm not going to worry about how I'm perceived by others. I'm actually going to take this moment to listen and learn from somebody who disagrees with me. That, in this day and age, this was like 12 years ago now, but today, in a deeply divided America, to not let your ego win may be the most courageous thing you can do. And that is why I'm so passionate about practicing moral courage, which means doing the right thing in the face of your fears. What is it that most of us fear? Regardless of the issue and regardless of the relationship, most of us fear being judged, especially being judged negatively. That's why I get why so many people go with the flow. Just do what their friends are doing and cave to peer pressure. Even in social movements for justice, you often find that what is being preached to the rest of the world, for example, equality, doesn't get practiced within the movement because people in the movement are afraid to stand up and say, we need integrity here, which is the kind of thing I was trying to say about my religion of Islam. Before we start pointing fingers at everybody else, let's take responsibility for how we are contradicting our own message, how we are abusing our own power. Moral courage, now more than ever. And to illustrate for you moral courage in action, I've brought with me just a 4-minute video, a video that we've played on Moral Courage TV, the YouTube channel that my project has started. This video features 2 people, Genesis and Lewis. They both live in Biloxi, Mississippi. Genesis is a biracial hip-hop artist who is deploying her talents to advocate that Mississippi's flag, which in many ways is a symbol of slavery-era America, be replaced with a flag that is much more inclusive. Lewis calls himself just a blue-collar guy. He is also a descendant of Confederates, and he believes that the flag should remain as is. Hot topic? You bet. But Genesis decided to do something revolutionary. Instead of demanding empathy from him, she decided to go first in the empathy department. She invited Lewis to come sit down with her so that she can hear where he is coming from. I want you to watch and take a look at what happens when you go first in the empathy department, which means taming your ego.
One day, when I look at the Mississippi state flag, I want to feel welcome and that my history and my heritage is just as valid as everyone else's. I'd like to see a flag that unites us rather than divides us. The crowd had no idea what I was going to do. The promoters of the club had no idea what I was going to do.
Mississippi just named April Confederate Heritage Month. They have the audacity to name April Confederate Heritage Month. I'm gonna show you how I celebrate that shit.
Speaking out on this issue wasn't an easy decision because I know the type of backlash that I would receive. The picture went viral. Engaging online and comments and messages, that's cool, you know, but there's nothing like looking somebody in the eyes and seeing the subtle nuances for them to be able to relate to you and for you to relate to them.
The Confederate battle flag, and I had family members who fought for the Confederacy. It was designed as a flag to differentiate troops on the battlefield.
So when you see the state flag, Mississippi state flag, how does it make you feel?
It's definitely a symbol of, home. What about you?
Makes me feel unwelcome. With my grandfather and my family being harassed by KKK and white supremacists, flying and waving that flag, there's a negative connotation when I think of that, and it's not something that I say represents me as a descendant of African Americans.
I see where people are offended by it, but I believe that we should just leave it be because it is history. It does show where we come from. We just need to educate the people as to what that flag is, what it really stands for.
To disrespect your ancestors is not my intent.
No.
At all. Just like I know you don't want to disrespect mine. But at the same time, I don't apologize for my protest because I do understand that.
To be heard.
Yeah, I do understand that many Confederate descendants do harbor that ideology of white supremacy and don't acknowledge the faults that came with the history. You know, Confederate veterans were the ones who birthed the KKK. What was your reaction when I did my protest?
At first I was kind of upset, and then I start to think about it from your point of view, and that flag has brought me no harm, no hatred towards me. You know, as much as I would like to have it remain, who's to say that my wishes should outweigh the wishes of another? Will I lose my heritage if that flag's changed? No, it won't. We always talk about, if something bothers you, do something about it. Not a lot of people do, and here you are. So I went from upset to understanding to respect. And I support your decision in wanting to change the flag.
To hear Lewis say that he believes in me, even though he disagrees with some of the things that I say, that's beautiful. When there's absolutely no trust, it's very hard to have conversations that don't get heated or get violent or abusive and abrasive. If you're unwilling to even listen to someone's point of view or try to empathize of when they're coming from, you're not really adding anything to the table. My name is Genesis B, and I am Moral Courage.
Pretty brave soul, huh? Part of her bravery is that she's risking her reputation as an activist by speaking with the enemy. Think about this. You can imagine that there will be more than a few people in her activist community who pull her aside and say, girl, what is wrong with you? You know, you don't do that kind of thing. You don't go there. You don't give a guy like that a platform. But she's not thinking about it strategically. She's thinking about it as a fellow human being. And what she realizes is that she can't bring Lewis on side until he feels the respect of those who want him to change. And you'll notice, Lewis says that he went from upset to understanding to respect. That's a journey that he took. And it couldn't have happened without Genesis treating him as a thinking, feeling being who has reasons for taking positions like he does. Since she started with low emotional defenses, he felt the permission to lower his as well. And now, these two are working together to bring people on both sides of the divide together in order to present a united front to the governor of Mississippi on a brand new flag design. All of which brings me back to football, right? Segue, seamless segue. If I was in a position to coach NFL players on how to get their message across, I would say acting on your values does lead to a greater good only if you are also interacting from your values along the way. Here's what I mean. When you think about it, isn't it true that all sustainable change begins with difficult dialogues? The dialogues themselves are not the change. They are not the end-all and be-all. But what they are is a necessary precondition for change that lasts. I have learned through my own journey as an activist for Islamic reform that if people, regardless of who they are, if people don't feel heard, the walls of suspicion about the other only go up. When people do feel heard, those walls steadily come down. And it's only when the change happens in here that policies and laws have a hope in hell of taking lasting effect. Meaning that ultimately, if one side in a two-sided discussion doesn't feel heard, what you can expect down the road is more tribalism, more polarization, and eventually backlash. Think about how all of this applies to what is going on and all that is going on in America today. And so I think this is a grand opportunity for each of us to ask ourselves, how can I use this time, and particularly today, to figure out who I need to develop relationships with? Listening does not have to mean agreeing with. It does mean creating space for people to feel respected. And that doesn't mean that you have to debate or that it has to get confrontational. Quite the opposite. You should feel free to ask questions of people you disagree with, but maybe more importantly, invite them to ask questions of you. At the very least, their questions will help you clarify why you believe what you believe, and will therefore help you become a better communicator of your values. And at best, just like what Genesis did, you will be helping to change the world by bringing more people on board. Questions, there we go, are the soul's way of saying, I'm ready to grow. What a gift. What a gift that you can give to yourself as much as to others. And so in that spirit of questioning, in the spirit of moral courage, and yes, in the spirit of ijtihad, I now throw it open to what I trust will be a vibrant Q&A. Thank you all very much.
Good morning and welcome to our community.
Thank you, Doctor.
Really touched. My question is, when you went through the turmoil and backlash, was there any significant difference between the way Muslim women treated you versus the Muslim men?
Interesting. Was there any significant any significant difference between the way Muslim women treated me versus Muslim men? At first, there really wasn't. It was, in many ways, pure anger on the part of my critics. Now, that doesn't mean all I got was pure anger. I got, sort of secret vows of support. But as we all know, media focus on the negative. And so that is what more and more people heard about, is the anger, which then allowed them to also feed into the anger. And many Muslim women were a part of that tidal wave of anger. However, over the next few years, as Muslim women began understanding that I am not here to tell them what to do. What I stand for is their choice to decide for themselves how they feel and what they believe. It was really at that point that I began getting many expressions of support from Muslim women. One thing I will tell you, just as a final thought here, the Muslim reform movement that actually does exist, you won't hear much about it because, again, if it bleeds, it leads, meaning media will focus on the negative and will rarely tell us about the positive developments on any issue. But I can report that in the Muslim reform movement that has emerged since then, there are, from what I can tell, a pretty equal number of voices, men and women. And what I find really interesting is that it's Muslim women who get the vast majority of the media coverage. Why? Because many journalists are operating from the assumption that they're victims of Islam. And so if Muslim women are finally beginning to rise up and speak their truth, then wow, something major must be happening here. So those prejudices about what Muslim women are still exist on the part of media, to the point where I'm often asked, Irshad, where are the men in the Muslim reform movement? Because they don't get that much attention. It's a bit of a mind bender. I'm happy to say that there's generally parity on this front. Thank you.
Hello, thanks for the great talk today.
Thank you.
I have a question about, so creating like safe spaces and creating engaging conversations with people who have differing views from you. I find that even though I do open up and I like want to validate other people's views, they sometimes don't always do the same thing, and instead are like, thank you for validating me, you still suck. And like, it's, how do you combat that feeling of like, why aren't you giving back?
So the way I approach any kind of change that I wish to be a part of, I actually don't enter into a conversation or into a relationship expecting reciprocity. I go in there offering empathy because that's the right thing to do, and because it makes me a better human being. And finally, because I might just have something to learn from this person. So it's not so much what can I do to make them suck less. It's what am I missing? What am I missing about why they believe what they believe? And when I can answer that question for myself because I've listened, then I know that this time that I've invested, and this patience that I've invested, has not gone to waste. Because what that information, i.e., understanding where the person I disagree with is coming from, what that information does is it then informs how I'm going to frame the issues to people who I know will, at the beginning, take issue with my stance. So no matter how you slice it, you have gained, you have grown as a result of engaging those with whom you disagree. As I say, the upside is that you might just change their hearts and minds. But even if you don't, they've helped you communicate in a more effective way. Thank you.
Hello, I actually have two questions. My first question was, in what way, in your opinion, can we as an American society really try to combat the I don't know exactly how to phrase it, but demonization, I suppose, of the religion Islam, the Middle Easterns as an ethnicity group, largely due to jihadist extremist behavior.
Right.
And then my second question is, what's your current opinion, going back to your previous topic of discussion about your fear for your life, et cetera, through a religious group, of the Buddhist-led genocide against Muslims in Myanmar?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for both. Let me start with the latter. What is my opinion about the genocide, or something very close to genocide, of the Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar? And the irony, to the degree that you can call it that, is that the purge of Muslims is being led by religious leaders, Buddhists, whom we would otherwise kind of stereotype as, peace-loving, chanting, Zen-like individuals. Well, first and foremost, all of this is to say that every single one of us has ego, without exception. And secondly, that merely saying nice things, merely chanting good things, does not good conduct make? I think in Christianity, I'm paraphrasing here from the Bible, but it is often said that if your faith consists only of words and never of deeds, then it's dead. And you can truly assess somebody's sincerity by what they do and not just what they say. So yes, I am outraged by the genocide against Rohingya Muslims. I am saddened that a Nobel Peace Prize winner, Aung San Suu Kyi, who is in many ways the leader of Myanmar, has remained silent, despite having won the Peace Prize many years ago. But I also accept that for her to stay in power and possibly moderate the behavior of the military junta who is ordering the slaughter and displacement of Rohingya Muslims, in order for her to stay in a position where she may have some influence, she needs to be careful about what she says early on. Life is complicated. There is such a thing as right and wrong, but one also has to take the time to ask, do I understand everything I need to understand about this situation in order to conclude that Aung San Suu Kyi is a hypocrite, or that the Rohingya Muslims are not being treated properly, or that Myanmar has violated human rights laws? Keep learning. Absolutely take positions, as I just have. I'm outraged. But keep learning, because only with more information can you truly decide whether the stance you've taken is a moral one. Now for your first question. What can non-Muslim Americans do to curb the demonization of the Islamic faith in this country? First and foremost, as I frankly overheard you say to your friend while I was writing my notes for this morning's keynote, you were saying to her, you know, it so bothers you when some people say, oh man, to hell with the Middle East, let's just nuke them all, right? And your response to that, as I overheard you say, was, are you kidding me? These are people we're talking about. People, fellow human beings. Exactly right. Exactly right. You don't, from the sense I get, you don't just stand by and let things slide. You say what you believe needs to be said. That is an excellent step towards supporting peaceful Muslims. I would also say that you could be supporting Muslims within the movement to reform certain practices within Islam. I know that there is a fear on the part of many non-Muslims that, you know, if I stand with other Muslims, then I'm actually not helping those Muslims, because then they will be accused of being westernized and caving to the enemy and so forth. You can, however, stand with those who support Islamic reformation from within, always making sure that it's their voices that get heard, not yours, but theirs. And one of the things you could easily, I think, be doing is working with a university journalism program to connect some of these Muslims to other journalists, to media who may not know that they exist, but whose stories absolutely deserve to be told. So there are all kinds of creative ways. Ask yourself, what access do I have to resources that others may not? And to the degree that you can identify that you have access to certain resources, use that access to give those others the voice that they deserve.
Hi.
Hi.
How has your relationship with Allah changed or developed throughout the course of your journey of questions and discussion?
Surprisingly, I think to those who fear questions, my faith has only deepened as a result of asking those questions. I will tell you, one of the weirder sort of turns in my own journey is that I often hear from atheists who say to me, Irshad, come on, come out of the closet. You are an atheist and you know it, okay? Just come clean. Do your conscience, which you so treasure, do it a favor. Declare your godlessness. And because I'm a firm believer that I don't have all truth, I've actually taken up the invitation, dare I say it, the challenge, to sit with myself and really probe whether I believe in God. And my truth is, for better or for worse, I do believe in God. And so in asking my questions, what I hope to be showing is that you don't have to buy into an extremist version of religion, i.e., no questions asked, in order to have faith. Faith is not the same as dogma. Dogma of any kind, including secular dogma, is brittle and it snaps under the spotlight of scrutiny because it is insecure. Dogma is fragile. That's why it cannot tolerate questions. Faith, on the other hand, is deepened by questions. Faith is a secure thing. It's a relationship of trust between yourself and, in my case, my Creator. And for that reason, I feel permitted to ask every question under the sun, trusting that my God is not so petty that he, she, or it will punish me for being genuinely human, but instead will, in turn, be grateful that I am remembering God every day when I ask these questions.
You spoke earlier during your presentation about asking questions and the religious leaders in your community either refusing to answer them and even not finding answers in the text. But in relating to the religious text, do you believe it's necessary to accept every part of a religion as it's written? Right. Or can you make your own beliefs based off of it, or only accept parts of it?
Right. Brilliant, brilliant question. Thank you for that. So, in the spirit of coming clean, many of my critics say, Irshad, you are cherry picking from the Quran. And I say to them, you are right. You are right. I am cherry picking. But so are you. You are cherry picking, I say, by ignoring the freedom-loving verses of the Quran. Those verses that remind us that we are not God, we as human beings. And therefore, we must have humility as we interpret verses and as we relate to other people, i.e., do not be imposing your interpretations on others. And so ultimately, I think that you can take the parts of a religion that you find to be dignifying and embrace them, and question the parts that you do not embrace because they do not confer dignity. Every faith that I'm aware of has some kind of a tradition of independent thinking and reinterpretation. Find that tradition within your faith. And it exists because it is there to be used. But let me make clear, it is there to be used with humility. which leads me to one final point. Many Muslims have told me, okay, so, you get to decide what you believe and won't believe. You get to basically make it up as you go along. Guess what, Irshad? That's what the jihadists are doing. They are making it up in order to win this war of hearts and minds. And I remind the people who tell me that I am no better than a jihadist, I remind them that the one part I haven't forgotten is the need to be humble. No jihadist who imposes his or her point of view remembers to be humble. And if there is going to be any punishment by God for my misinterpretation, I will be responsible for that misinterpretation. I will not have put others in the awkward position of saying, but Irshad told me to. I hope that answers some of your question.
I really loved your book and I loved your presentation today. But I wanted to ask you, you have a whole discussion today about opening chains of dialogue as mutual respect between people. But what about, having conversations about like changing of flags is one thing, but what about having conversation with people who believe that certain races and ethnicities don't deserve to exist or that they should disappear? Is there any way to have any kind of rational open dialogue with people who fundamentally don't believe the same rational beliefs that you do?
Right. I'll go one step better. I think what you're asking me is, what about those who openly and actively hate, right? So we can have, disagreements with people who are open to hearing us. But what do you do with those, or about those, who aren't open to hearing your point of view? And this is where I say, you always have the option to walk away. You really do. All I'm asking is, try not to walk away prematurely. Before you decide that somebody is an irredeemable bigot, before you decide that, take the time to inform yourself about where he or she is coming from. Take the time to see if they're open to hearing where you're coming from. And you can't know that unless you get to know him or her as an individual and not as a mascot of a group that you abhor. If you decide, having invested that kind of time, that this person is, for example, a violent white supremacist or a neo-Nazi, you do what you have to do. If you need to walk away, go for it. If you need to tell that person, this is the sinking feeling I'm getting about your point of view, say what you need to say. Just don't rush to judgment. Have judgments. Absolutely have judgments. I am not a relativist. You should have judgments. How can you be an ethical global citizen if you're not willing to judge ethics? So have those judgments, but not too soon. That's it.
Thank you so much for your awesome words, really, really eye-opening. So Stetson University itself is a community of so many diverse student leaders from so many different backgrounds. So my question to you is, what advice would you give student leaders and other students on campus? What advice would you give us to foster a collegiate community of diversity and be able to foster a community of active questions and listeners?
Great. The quick answer to this is, remember that diversity doesn't just mean my religion, your gender, somebody else's skin color, and still somebody else's sexual orientation. These are categories, okay? And they're important, but make them the starting point, not the finish line of how you get to know that individual, number one. Number two is, remember that diversity, if it's going to be worth that name, also includes diversity of thought. And that really does mean then engaging in conversation and probably in doing so finding like these unexpected, sort of overlapping areas of common ground that allow you to actually work together for a greater good. And the third thing I would say, final piece of advice, come to my workshop later today. Why? Because we are going to be dissecting what Genesis did right in approaching Lewis and in lowering his emotional defenses to the point where he actually says and makes good on his support of her advocacy to replace the Mississippi state flag. There is a way that she approached all of this that we can take lessons from. And so if you're looking for some kind of a step-by-step, some kind of a, checklist, if you will, of what you can be doing to make conversations more constructive, given diverse points of view, that is what we'll aim to co-create in the workshop today. Thank you for the question.